Can you hear me, Andrea?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I switched offices, so I'm in my coworker's office. Now they were making too much noise.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I was gonna go ahead and put up my presentation.
Okay.
Let's see.
When do Dr. Sanders supposed to come in?
I'm about to call him shortly. Uh,
Okay.
he should be coming in right after me.
All right. So should I introduce both of y'all at the same time?
No, you can introduce. I haven't heard from him. He was supposed to call me yesterday, but he was red and excited. So I'm assuming he's comfortable. He has his login and everything. So I'm gonna reach out to him.
Okay.
So how do I? Okay. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Mm-hmm.
All righty. I am going to mute and I'm going to call Dr. Sanders.
Okay.
Andrea?
Good morning. I'm not sure if anyone is on yet, but if you are, please put your name and health department or organization you are represented in the chat box for me. Thank you.
Hello, Andrea.
Just received your email. However, it's nobody actually up here yet.
In our session.
Yes.
Okay. If you would like, I could still get started here shortly since it's being recorded.
Okay, we got one person up here. Good morning. To give everyone a few more minutes, maybe about 5 more minutes, to see if we have anyone else to join before we get started. Good morning, employee work experience and research on COVID-19 section. We will be getting started in about 5 minutes. We're going to see if anyone else would like to join. As you join the section, please put your name and health department or organization you are representing in the chat. Thank you. Good morning. morning, everyone. We are going to be starting in a few minutes. We are allowing other people to join the section. As you join the section, please put your name and health department or organization you are representing in the chat. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Employee Work Experience and Research on COVID-19 section. We are giving our speaker a few minutes. However, as you join the section, please put your name, health department, and organization you are representing in the chat. Good morning, LaShonda. Are you ready?
Good morning.
All right. Well, LaShonda is the Quality Assurance Manager at Forsyth County Public Health Department. Dr. Oak earned her PhD at Walden University in Health Science and Master in Health Administration and Business Administration at Pfeiffer University. Dr. Oak research has focused primarily on organizational cultures and quality improvement. In her role as the Quality Assurance Manager, she oversees quality assurance and compliance function. Let's welcome LaShonda Oak, Dr. LaShonda Oak.
Thank you. And good morning. The session is about navigation, the workplace culture during a pandemic. And so it's pretty much just an overview of what we all have been experiencing, as well as just understanding that we are in this together. So basically the agenda for this session is to understand our behaviors. And when I say our, that's me included, our behaviors, attitude, and concerns during this COVID pandemic in the workplace. So I conducted a research study to identify what factors influences employees' behaviors in organizations during a pandemic. I looked at H1N1 and compared it to where we are now with COVID-19. The research is the exact same research questions that was sent out during H1N1 that the individuals has taken, and we'll go through those questions throughout this session. The purpose is basically just to help us as individuals and in leadership to identify a contingency plan, understand individuals' behaviors and our fears during a pandemic. Organizations that were polled were public health departments in North Carolina, temporary agencies, police departments, government agencies, Department of Social Services, and then other is pretty much including like banks. So I solicited surveys out to different banks to see how they feel as well. And feel free to enter any questions in our chat session at any time if you need to stop me or have a question. So, what factors influences employees' behavior in organizations during a pandemic? And like I said before, we'll go through some of the questions that were from the H1N1, since that was our last major pandemic that we've had. So, one of the questions was, since the COVID-19 began, have you at any point been concerned about getting sick from COVID-19 while at work or at any point? And as you can see, the majority of the individuals that took the survey said yes. We had a few that said no, but the majority is saying yes. Of course, it's something that's unknown. It's something that we are all getting familiar with and learning. So the majority is saying, yeah, they are concerned about getting sick. And then the next question was, how concerned are you? So as you can see, they're very concerned, somewhat concerned, and then we had a few that said not very concerned. So with those two questions, the development of organization measures come into play. So for the individuals that are concerned or and very concerned or majorly concerned, what organization measures can we put in place? And a lot of organizations have installed or have implemented some of these things that's listed here. So the online smartphone tool solutions. I know a lot of organizations, before you enter the building, you're able to do the COVID tool, asking the questions, have you experienced a fever and things like that. Also, entering buildings, their temperature checks. So these are measures that have been put in place or can be put in place to help with these things. Plexiglass. So a lot of in-place organizations have put up plexiglass. I know at our organization we have plexiglass almost everywhere. So registration, plexiglass, and these are things that we never even thought about prior to this. I know for me, in my position, never even thought about putting up plexiglass, but it just kind of gives us a different perspective of how we need to look at things going forward. And as well, hand washing. So hand washing was one of the normal things. We have those posted in our bathroom stalls. We have them posted in throughout the hallway. So it's just a quick reminder of the proper hand washing. I'm sure everyone has always washed their hands, but it's just the reminder of how the technique to actually wash hands. So these are just some organizational measures that that has been taken or can be taken. So another question was, since the beginning of March 2020, have you seen any posters, billboards, web-based ads, television, newspapers that provided information about how to keep yourself healthy from the COVID while at work? And so as you can see, the majority of the individuals say yes, and then there was just a few said no. Now, this survey was taken around March, so it's been a little while since the survey has started, and the survey was conducted sort of right at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, and I would say between February and March. So this is where the data was captured. So of course, once it started, there were a lot of advertising. Organizations did put out posters or inform staff of what to do to stay healthy. So organizational measure, of course, there's flyers out. CDC has flyers of things not to do, close contact, clean nose, and things like that. So this is just an example of some of the of a poster that is shared on CDC website. So preparedness. How do we get prepared for it? Of course, most individuals, most organizations weren't prepared in the sense of the capacity of how fast it is moving, and just the uncertainty of what to do. So another question was, to the best of your knowledge, since March 2020, has anyone in your company become ill with COVID-19? Some individuals said yes, some said no, and some said, and this was just based on the position that they may hold, the organization they may hold, as far as like I stated, some police officers has taken this. So it depends on the job function of the individual that answered this question, because of course, with HIPAA and things like that, some things are not privy for people to know or individuals to know within the workplace of what is actually of individuals becoming ill. So, but this is kind of what the responses were. So do you feel this outbreak of COVID-19 made your company more prepared for a possible future outbreak of a serious contagious illness, less prepared for a possible future outbreak of a serious contagious illness, or made no difference in your company's preparedness? And so, as you can see, most people feel like their organization was prepared, which is really great. I know that speaks to having a great preparedness team within an organization. So if there's a pandemic or things like that, so a lot of people said that they are prepared. We had a few, of course, made no difference, and then a few just said, I don't know. So overall, how prepared for the COVID-19 outbreak would you say your company was? So as you can see, once again, some said somewhat prepared, very prepared, not very prepared, and not prepared at all. So this is kind of, you can see how the curve goes up and then come back down. So another question was, to the best of your knowledge, did your company provide information to employees about the following as a part of their efforts to reduce the COVID? So basically the communication, how was the communication? And I think a lot of organizations had to identify what is the best way to communicate, and going forward, what is the best way to communicate with employees to make sure everything is being from the top leadership down. What's the communication methods, through email, through having virtual meetings. So it's kind of like still like a learning curve to identify, but how the company would keep business running if employees were absent because they were sick or had to take care of others. So these are some of the things to consider. How to keep COVID from spreading between employees at the workplace. Changes to sick leave policies. What does that look like? That will make it easier for employees to stay home from work because they are sick. Changes to leave policies that will make it easier for employees to work from home because they have to take care of a family member, as well as changes to leave policies that will make it easier for families to stay home because they have to take care of their children, or because their school's closing. So these were some of the things that organizations had to identify very, very quickly and make the adjustment. But from this presentation, I would like for organizations to think going forward, how can we keep this contingency going with this pandemic, or after the pandemic, should I say. So would any of the following information have been helpful to you? So how the company would keep the business running. So if you knew these questions prior to, would that be helpful? So if there were some information that was shared in a policy or shared through a meeting, would the information would have been helpful to you or will be helpful to you going forward? So you'll have that sense of calm that, okay, if this happens, then I can stay at home and work and with my children, or I can work from home. So CTC, communication during uncertainty. So you have to have confidence. The extent to which employees believe that those making the decisions intends to perform its agreed upon activity, and those activities really benefit them. So like I stated, the information of, okay, if I do stay at home, is it okay? I know a lot of people, especially in my organization, are very work driven, and it was a conscious decision of how to do things and what to do and when to do it. And then the need for trust. You can't manage people if they can't trust you. So individuals have to trust in the leadership and in the individuals that are making those decisions to know that it is okay. And then, of course, consistency, being consistent with the communication. So if it's communication through virtual meetings, if it's communication through emails, just make sure that there is consistency. So CTC, that's the biggest thing. Remember those initials. So another question was, as you know, many companies across the U.S. have taken various steps to respond to COVID outbreaks. To the best of your knowledge, did your company have to take any of these measures? So did companies provide sanitizer? And mind you, like I say, that the surveys was done around like February or March. And so these are some of the things. Did they provide sanitizer or any alcohol base that was available, that was out? Encourage employees to stay at home, create a backup system if someone was out sick. So did you have a backup, or was there some type of way for the work to still continue to be done? And train you to cover for someone else. So training the trainer or having someone there, and also offering testing. So that's still one of the biggest things that what testing now has been expanded, but at the beginning was there testing offered for employees to say, hey, you can go here and get tested, or organizations was taking care of that for them. So any of the following information would have been helpful to you: how to keep the business running if employees were absent from work, and also how to keep the COVID from spreading from employee to employee while you're at work. So if you had this information prior to knowing how organization will handle these things, that would have been helpful to you. So a contingency plan. So how many people can perform? These are some of the questions that I encourage organizations to think about, even now going forward. How many people can perform multiple job duties in your organization? So if you were to leave today, how many people know how to do your job? I think that was one of the biggest challenges that some organizations face, because sometimes they're short staffed. So if you're short staffed, you may not have anyone to step in at that time. But this is something to think about. How many people can perform a multiple tasks? Are processes and procedures written and easily accessible? So are the procedures or policies available where employees can go and pull them up and answer some of those questions, so they'll know how to make conscious decisions? And then how many employee job functions allow them to work from home, and what equipment is needed? So for functions that can work from home, is that a possibility? And then as well, what type of equipment or software will be needed as far as your laptop or Wi-Fi or any type of connection? What will be needed going forward for people to do that? And I think that was like one of the things that a lot of organizations had to identify as well. I know in our organization, we had to identify what functions can, work from home, because the contingency plan was for people to not be in the building if need be, or if possible, to eliminate the spread from employee to employee. But this was one of the challenges that some organizations face. So with working from home, what percent, and I just pulled this survey, what percent of office employees do you anticipate will work remotely at least one day a week? So right now, and this survey was polled in June 25th, 2020, as you can see at the bottom, this is kind of where it looks. So before COVID, it was 39%. During COVID, which is now 77%. And then after is 55%. So the after is pretty much the projected, because most organizations see that, hey, people can work from home and things can still be done. So it actually gave organizations a different perspective also of how the workflows look, how the work can be done, whether it was in the office or out of the office. And based on this poll, it seems like a lot of organizations are going to kind of maintain this same workflows, with 55% of people still at least working from home at least one day a week. But as you can see, 75% of office workers would like to work remotely at least 2 days a week. So this is kind of one of those things that would kind of just like evolve itself and allow employees to work from home or find a balance to work from home or in the office. So another question, thinking about yourself, did you have any do you have any of the following things to work in order to reduce the chances that you will get sick? So did you do any of the things like avoid crowded places at work, like not attending the break room? So as you can see, a lot of people say yes. More frequent hand washing. So a lot of times, I know I have one of my coworkers, she'll just get up and go wash her hands. And then conduct meetings by telephone or video. I think that was the biggest transition, where now instead of in-person meetings as we are now with our conference, everything is virtual. So these are a lot of things that people have put in place or done to reduce their chances. So employers' action plans. So some of the things that employers can do, organizations can do, is keep facilities well stocked. And so this is one of the ones I thought about, where it says stock on paper towels in a bathroom. This is something that we normally, you just normally don't think about. Monitoring temperature and humidity. So it says research suggests that workplaces are actually cooler in temperature. This helps to reduce bacteria and viruses. So most hospitals have between 65 to 69% temperature gauge. So having a cooler environment helps to reduce the bacteria and viruses, as well as increasing cleaning services. So cleaning surfaces more often than normal. These are some of the things that, as far as action plans, that can be taken. So this was another question. So if the vaccine were available, or if it comes available, would you get the vaccine? And there's just, as you can see, some people say yes, some people say no, and some people say they unsure right now. So that's just a way to, so it just depends on the individual. And it's just across the board. There's no, yes, I'm going to get it. It's just, I guess it just depends on the individual. So the coronavirus tracker. So of course, the CDC, as well as other labs and organizations, are working on the virus. So this is just pretty much like what the pre-virus tracker looks like. So you have your preclinical, and then the vaccine, yet not in humans, 142. Phase 1 vaccine in a small scale, safety trials 35. The vaccines expand to safety trial 19, vaccine in large scale 11, and then approved. So of course the vaccine has not been approved yet. It's still under research. So this is just kind of how, when they are actually testing the vaccine, this is just the phases that it go through. So many people are asking, like, what now? Okay, we're a few months in, or a lot of months in, actually. We've been living our new normal for a long time now. We are getting settled in and we're getting adjusted. So what do we do now? So organizational focus needs to be a secure workplace. So employees have the physical and the mental health. A lot of employees struggle with, okay, my children are at home. They are doing school from home. I may have to go to work. It becomes a physical as well as a mental for employees, just to try to identify, how should I work from home? Should I stay in the office, or stay home with the children? And then organization stability. So it's just finding that balance, the work-home balance, as well as your family, to stay with the mental state. Like I said, it could be a physical and mental. So organizations need to ensure that staff have that balance, as well as, like I stated earlier, the trust and leadership. So build the trust by listening to the workforce, having them to share how they feel. And that was the whole purpose of me doing this survey and research, is to identify how people are actually feeling during this time. And then empower your employees, to give them the strength to say, hey, And once again, why I want to do the session, that we are all in this together to empower each other, to support each other, to call on each other to say, hey, how are your organization doing? How are things going here? Is there anything I can do to help you? But mainly like with as far as supervisors and employees within themselves to reach out to your coworker to say, hey, is everything okay? So that's kind of like the organization's focus. Then you have your individual focus. So us as individuals, pause and take a break. So I know we usually get 15-minute breaks in an 8-hour period, but pause and take a break. If that means going outside, just whatever you do to take a break. And then just remembering, focusing on one thing at a time. And I like this quote, is not only one thing, is one thing at a time. And then identifying an activity that helps you relax. So I like this picture because it's like you can go for a walk, you can drive down a trail, just with trees, just get in a car and take a drive. Just find an activity that helps you relax to deal with whatever you have to deal with. So that concludes my presentation. I would like to thank you for your time. I have included my contact information in here, and at this time, I will take any questions. Okay, if there's no questions, then I will transition. Oh, go ahead.
I
Sorry,
wanted
Andrea.
to let you know I'm up here trying to get Dr. Sanders online. All right,
Okay.
we'll be up here in a few minutes.
Okay, so we will transition over to the actual research, and that is coming from Dr. Sanders, and Andrea will be introducing him shortly. And once again, thank you for your time.
If you give us a few minutes, I'm trying to get Dr. Sanders into the session, and he will be up in a few minutes. All right, everyone, Dr. Sanders is getting ready to join, and I am going to introduce him. All right. Dr. John Watson Sanders is a professor of medicine and chief of the infection disease section at Wake Forest School of Medicine. Dr. Sanders earned his medical degree at Tulane University and completed internal medicine and infection disease training in the military. Dr. Sanders' clinical and research interests includes tropical disease and infection of military importance. While in the Navy, he led research programs for the development of new vaccines, diagnostics, and medicine. He has continued that work at Wake Forest and is leading a large epidemiological study of COVID-19. Is the Wake Forest PI for modern COVID-19 vaccine trial and is conducting several preclinical studies on experimental vaccines for COVID-19. Let's welcome Dr. John Sanders.
Andrea, thank you so much for all your work to get me in here. This was very stressful. And now I'm going to stress you a little bit more, Andrea, because sharing the screen, I don't see the button.
Okay, so if you look down to the bottom where you see your video, mic, and then you see it play, and then you see a little monitor with a line through it, click on that.
Excellent. So now do you see overview of COVID-19 research?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. I apologize for my technical inabilities, which are continuing here. I hope you can hear me okay. It's a real pleasure to be here today. This is, there is a lot going on in COVID-19, a lot going on in COVID-19 research. And I want to start off by saying I don't see any way for us to get through all of that together. So I want to just do a broad overview, talk to you a little bit about the Wake Forest experience, and just try to give everyone some insight to what's going on overall. And so if I make any mistakes on this, it's only my fault, not anybody else's fault. And let me say right up front, there is a lot being spent on COVID-19 research. There is a lot of activity worldwide. This is a quick summary as of the middle of July. So this is even more now. How much money the federal government had spent already. You can see that was up to $7.1 billion. Most of that's been on vaccine development and starting to roll out the vaccine trials, but almost $1 billion on therapeutics, 45 million on diagnostics. And you can see that the number just goes on. And that's just the federal government spending. I have not been able to find the exact amount of money that private industry, that the big pharmaceutical companies, small biotech companies, venture capitalists have put into the COVID epidemic so far. But based on NIH data from previous years, we would expect that it's probably 3 or 4 times the amount of money that the government has put into it directly. So year to year, the greatest funder of biomedical research in the United States is private industry. And I think that is likely really going to be the exact distribution when we retrospectively are able to look at who paid for what in this early development. And lots of those things are getting a lot of press and publicity, but there are a couple that are getting even more than most. And I wanted to make sure that we all understand what those terms mean and who is indicated by some of these terms. The one that I hear the most is often Operation Warp Speed, and that's the U.S. government body. They brought a government panel together with the authority of government. It's responsible for developing the strategy, for getting coordination among public and private institutions, and for dedicating the resources that Congress has shifted over to the executive branch, and then this group in the executive branch carves out and distributes the resources for rapidly developing an approved vaccine. Now that works closely with ACTIVE, that we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. And that's an NIH established public-private partnership for coordinating the therapeutic and vaccine trials. And then within ACTIVE, linked over to ACTIVE, is the COVID Prevention Network, the NIH-funded network being utilized for vaccine trials. And of course, then, there are all sorts of industry-sponsored trials as well. Well, like I said, I just don't see how I can go through all that's taking place in North Carolina between our great universities all over the state. There are lots and lots of small projects and big projects, multidisciplinary efforts. Several of our institutions are leading national multidisciplinary efforts. And so I don't mean to minimize the fantastic work taking place at all over the state. I just wouldn't be able to cover it all. So I'm going to use our institution, Wake Forest, as an example of the sort of work that's taking place. And here at Wake Forest, we have a number of preclinical studies. We have our Wake Forest Institute of Regenerative Medicine has developed little lung organoids, little vascular organoids that's, basically a lung on a microchip, and are working to test therapeutics, new drugs. Instead of giving it to an animal, they infect just that lung and then try new drugs on that. There are animal studies taking place. I have I have a couple of different vaccine candidates running through preclinical studies now. There are biologic, meaning antibody and other immune modulator studies going through in those preclinical work. That's very similar to things that are taking place in Chapel Hill and at Duke and at other institutions across the state. Then we have registry studies. Those registry studies, some of them are local and some of them are national, and they look at specific outcomes. So trying to identify patients who may have, ended up on a ventilator, or patients who may have had a heart attack, to put them into a registry study for later evaluation, or are linked with specific comorbidities. For example, we have researchers in our pulmonary department who have collected registries of volunteers who have cystic fibrosis or emphysema, investigators in our nephrology department who are looking at patients with chronic kidney disease and are getting their permission and putting them on a list for later evaluation. Then we have clinical trials taking place, and those clinical trials range from prevention trials to treatment trials. And then some epidemiologic studies where we're trying to learn more about the disease process specifically. So let me mention some of the studies that have already come and gone within the framework of clinical trials. One of the drugs that got lots of notoriety is hydroxychloroquine, an anti-malarial drug that is frequently used as an anti-inflammatory drug. And there were reasons to think that it might have antiviral activity, and there are still studies going on internationally, and still some studies going on looking at hydroxychloroquine. But there was a large multi-center prospective clinical trial called the ORCID study, sponsored by NIH and run through something called the PEDAL network. Here at Wake Forest, Clark Files and Kevin Gibbs, two of our pulmonologists, critical care physicians, led the effort here. We were very, very happy to say that we were one of the leaders nationally in enrolling people into this study. And it showed fairly conclusively that hydroxychloroquine did not provide any significant benefit to the treatment of severe COVID-19. There was another example. So that trial was sponsored by NIH. Give an example of one sponsored by industry. It was the Mariposa trial, which was an open label dose comparison study of an anti-inflammatory immune modulator called tocilizumab. And it was run by one of our infectious disease doctors here locally, Karin Morse. Again, proud that Wake Forest was one of the most significant contributors to the data nationally. But that study has also been concluded, and the publication has come out showing that it did not significantly impact the outcome of COVID-19. Now, we have both ongoing outpatient and ongoing inpatient clinical trials right now. Just as an example of some of the outpatient clinical trials, there's the HERO network, which is a network, a registry of healthcare workers across the country. It's actually being the primary investigating institution for the HERO network. The coordinating network is Duke. They're doing a great job of getting people registered across the nation who we anticipate would be at high risk for exposure, healthcare workers, and then looking at various different studies, psychological studies, emotional stress studies, and this one, the hydroxychloroquine prophylaxis study. So, I just mentioned that the clinical trial showed that hydroxychloroquine didn't work for treatment, but there is still an open question about whether it might work as prophylaxis. I would say most of the data piling up for hydroxychloroquine suggests it would not work for that. There have been a couple of prophylaxis studies that have come out suggesting that it would not. But this study is still open, still enrolling, and trying to answer that very soundly and safely. Other outpatient trials that are going on here at Wake Forest include looking at an antiviral oral agent, an antiviral pill called EIDD, and how well that would work. It has a similar activity to the IV drug remdesivir that is being used nationally so effectively. And so there's a hope that there could be an oral agent that people could use at home rather than having to come into the hospital and get an IV. That is enrolling now at our site and at multiple sites, including Chapel Hill in North Carolina and other sites across the country. And then there's a study of an inhaled steroid, cyclesinide, that is used, is typically would be used for the treatment of inflammatory lung disease like asthma and COPD, but is being used to see if potentially some antiviral effect of that drug, but more importantly, maybe the anti-inflammatory effect of that drug might impact the progression of disease. And so those are going on now. And there, as I mentioned, there are hundreds of trials taking place nationally, but these are good examples of trials that are taking place. Within the framework of inpatient trials, there are lots and lots of industry-sponsored trials taking place everywhere. But within NIH, they have focused their activity on something called the ACTIVE Network, which is the Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Interventions and Vaccines Network. This is a public-private partnership intended to accelerate the discovery of therapeutics and vaccines. And they are running a series of what are called adaptive trials. These are master protocols that are held at a central institution. And then the protocol is adapted to add new drugs into the protocol as we rapidly learn more about it. And they are broken down into 5 different categories. They just named the Big Effects trial Active 5. So Active 1 through 5, where they are taking standard of care therapy and then adding in this adaptive framework other treatment modalities to it. So Active 1 is looking at immune modulators, anti-inflammatory drugs. We know that dexamethasone, the steroid agent, has been very, very effective. It's so far the only agent that's been tried nationally or internationally so far that's had a clear impact on mortality. And I think that we are all seeing how very effective it has been in helping us to treat patients. There may be other immune modulators that might help suppress this cytokine storm and the inflammatory conditions that people are experiencing that could help even more. Active 2 is focusing on outpatient monoclonal antibodies. So, I think that monoclonal antibodies are getting a lot of attention this week since the president received the Regeneron monoclonal antibody therapy. So there are outpatient monoclonal antibodies. Right now, this is these trials are looking at both the Regeneron product and in the active case, a lot of emphasis on the Eli Lilly monoclonal antibody product, but other monoclonal antibodies are being tried as part of this ongoing adaptive trial through Active 2. That same approach is being used in Active 3, but instead of on the outpatient side, that's on the more severely ill patients on the inpatient side. Active 4 is looking at standard of care and then adding different antithrombotics. And right now, those are standard antithrombotics, heparin, aspirin, so low molecular weight heparin, aspirin, that sort of antithrombotic. We know that a number of the most severely ill patients with COVID have, as part of their inflammatory cascade, have been hypercoagulable. They have formed blood clots much too easily. And so this is being explored as an adjunct to standard therapy. And then the Big Effects trial, as NIH was calling it, the same sort of design, and now they've merged it into this active framework, looking at linzulumab, another monoclonal antibody, but this one specifically, instead of being a monoclonal antibody targeting the virus, it's monoclonal antibody, the one that they're starting off with, trying to suppress a couple of arms of the cell-mediated immune system, again, as part of that immunomodulation. So here at Wake Forest, we are participating in 4 out of 5. We're leading efforts here in 4 out of 5 of these active trials. And again, our universities and academic medical centers across the state are participating in several of these as well. This is the government rollout way to structure these. It's it's a really interesting design, and I think it gives us a framework to see how people are shaping the interventional trials going forward. Those are interventional trials. How about prevention trials? So the COVID Prevention Network is the lead activity for the vaccine trials. How do we prevent that? Just a quick reminder of different vaccine platforms, because we're going to touch on this in just a second. There are a whole lot of ways to make a vaccine, going from the old-fashioned inactivated vaccine, just kill the germ, kill the bacteria, kill the virus, and give that. Those are generally safe. We have a number of important vaccines that use that, but they're not considered to create as strong an immunity or long-lasting immunity. Much better way to get strong immunity or long-lasting immunity is a live attenuated vaccine, where you take a germ, a virus or bacteria, and you weaken it. However, those can sometimes be dangerous. And a more modern way to do it are subunit vaccines, where you take just a piece of the germ, the antigen. Often you combine it with an adjuvant, something that boosts the immunity to that antigen, to that piece. That's a great way to produce a vaccine. And then there are viral vector vaccines, which can really be one of 2 different things. But for this chart, I've indicated that you can modify a safe virus so that it expresses or shows a protein, an antigen from a different virus, so that you can give a safe virus but stimulate an immune response to that more dangerous virus, the disease causing virus. That's a more, that's That's a more cutting edge way to do a vaccine, and we don't have a lot of licensed examples in that. There is a licensed Ebola vaccine from Johnson & Johnson that uses that technology, but we have not used that here in the United States. We've used it in Africa, and there are a couple of veterinary vaccines that have used that. And then there are two other ways to do genetic-based vaccines. That's a DNA vaccine where you insert a string of DNA into somebody's cells using a DNA plasmid. And then our cells produce proteins that look like the virus, not the virus, but that look like the virus, that piece or that antigen. You can do the same thing with messenger RNA. These are safe. We think that they're going to be very immunogenic, but we don't have good licensed examples of these yet. So there are over 150 COVID vaccines in development or testing. Based on the New York Times count yesterday, 11 of those have made it all the way into phase 3 studies somewhere in the world, where they're being large-scale tests to see how effective are they. Now, most of those fit into most of those are listed on this slide that I took from the AVAC advocacy group. And you can see that some of them are DNA-based vaccines, like the Sanofi vaccine that's not made it into phase 3 yet, but is working through. Some of them, 2 of the lead vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, are using the messenger RNA approach. There are a few inactivated vaccines, but none here in the US. The Chinese have gone after the inactivated approach, and I think that it's a very important thing to study. We just don't have any of the US institutions doing that. Viral vector vaccines, there's both the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that are using viruses. They're using them slightly different ways, but that are using viruses to do that vaccine. AstraZeneca using a adenovirus from chimpanzees that would deliver with it the marker for COVID. Johnson & Johnson using an adenovirus from humans, but that doesn't, usually cause much disease. And when it does, it's usually a diarrheal disease in children and very mild. So they think both of those are safe. They've been given to thousands of people before, and now they're working through that process with COVID. Merck has a similar one that's coming behind it. And then subunit vaccines, Novavax here in the United States has a subunit vaccine just using a fragment or a piece of the virus with an antigen. And there are a lot more companies looking at that approach now as well. So there is a real race to see who's going to have that vaccine come out first. The AstraZeneca vaccine that was really invented with Oxford University in England got out ahead, but now it looks like Pfizer might be in the lead in terms of enrollment, but Moderna and Novavax and Johnson & Johnson are all starting to enroll people here in the US and nationally. Now, AstraZeneca, while getting out ahead, has had a couple of severe adverse events that have been reported. One, they have given out public information and have said that when they evaluated it, they decided that the volunteer actually had multiple sclerosis, and they did not think that it was related to the vaccine. The other one, the volunteer had something called transverse myelitis, which is an inflammatory band across the spine. They have not released much information about that yet. Quite frankly, with only one case, it would be very difficult to determine whether that was from the vaccine or just by chance. But it is very worrisome. Worrisome enough that while Britain and Brazil have allowed them to continue enrolling, the FDA is still looking at that data and have paused enrollment for the time being for that vaccine. So what's the timetable for these trials ending? We don't know. The FDA just changed the requirements a bit. to say that they want at least 2 months of clear follow-up after enrollment before getting approval. So we know that puts the timeline after Election Day. But it may be that it will be longer than that anyway. It depends on how many people who are in the trial get COVID so that they can determine whether it worked or not. It's also dependent on how well we enroll into the studies. So you've probably heard that there is a lot of concern about having good demographic representation in these studies, and that's absolutely important. For a variety of reasons, we want good representation of volunteers. And while the COVID Prevention Network has been able to get good enrollment, good interest nationally, and we at Wake Forest, we're on the Moderna study right now. We will be rolling into the Johnson & Johnson study and then the Novavax study as part of the COVID Prevention Network. As soon as we finish enrollment with the first study and then the second study, we move to those others. Our experience with the Moderna study so far is that, yes, we also had lots of interest to enroll in the study, lots of people willing to participate, but demographically, we have not done as well. So we kind of mirror the COVID Prevention Network that we got early great enrollment, but as we try to really focus on that the demographic subset of underrepresented minorities, we are stalling out. And that's happening nationally. So enrollment is slowing down tremendously in these studies, largely due to the real focus on trying to get demographic representation. And quite frankly, the difficulty because of decades of historically relevant distrust among African Americans and then among the Latinx community for other social reasons as well, for participating in these sort of studies. It's generated a lot of concern about when we will be able to complete these studies, how representative they will be. And as that discussion takes place, there is certainly ample room for complaints from all sides of the political aisle and political spectrum about people casting aspersions on the quality of the research. I was very grateful to see this editorial in Science magazine that came out just yesterday, saying, "Calm down about political mischief." Most of the accusations of political mischief really are unfounded. These trials are being conducted very, very rapidly, extremely rapidly, but without, it's the same people that conduct these clinical trials, the COVID Prevention Network, it's the same organizations, the same institutions, the same design that have been used over and over again, just being done at a very rapid pace. And say, well, if you go rapidly, does that mean we're going to make mistakes? Well, yeah, that is a real possibility. Often when it takes years to do these studies, you do see some side effects, some adverse events that maybe took a little longer to present or to be picked up on that we might not see going this fast. But I want to reassure everybody that clearly, what is coming through from NIH and the COVID Prevention Network is that these studies will go on. People who are in the studies will be followed throughout the study, even after we know whether it's effective, to be looking for potential adverse events. And they will roll into phase 4 studies, where we will be watching for safety and good and bad outcomes. And that is standard. And we've seen a number of drugs and vaccines. For instance, the rotavirus vaccine from a couple of decades ago that was released, was being used nationally, and in phase 4 studies, they picked up on some adverse events and pulled it back. And so that is still in plan, and those will take place. The other thing I want to say about all these vaccines, a number of people here at Wake Forest have commented about how we went from 0 to 60 on these vaccines. And I think it does feel that way. But I want to reiterate that we didn't go from 0 to 60. These various vaccines, the messenger RNA, the DNA, the chimpanzee adenovirus, these things have been worked on for decades. And part of the reason they've been worked on for decades was just for this event. You know, there's a famous story of President Clinton reading the book, The Coming Plague, Laurie Garrett's great book from the mid-1990s, reading it and saying, oh my gosh, there's going to be a coming plague. We've got to start putting in lots of efforts to discover it early and to have things in place. And President Clinton, by executive action in 1995, created a whole framework of disease surveillance and disease preparation that really we are still operating on today. There's an equally famous story of President Bush reading the Great Plague, the Great Flu, about the 1918 flu epidemic, and coming in and saying, you know, everything that President Clinton did was great, but we've got to double down on that and put more effort into that. And so, you know, going back to at least the 1990s, there has been extensive work in all of this done in anticipation that we would have another big flu pandemic, a coronavirus epidemic or pandemic, just like we're having. So all of these vaccines seem to have come out of nowhere, but truthfully, they've been worked on for decades, including lots of safety data for decades in preparation for just this. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about some epidemiologic studies. And one that we're very proud of is the COVID-19 Community Research Partnership. This is the one I'm going to focus on. And this is a study that being primarily run out of Wake Forest Baptist, but with partners across the state and across the Atlantic coast. And the way it works is that volunteers from the region, especially those tied to our healthcare system, enroll, and we combine a combination of daily syndromic surveillance, daily symptom monitoring, and contact monitoring with electronic health record data pull, so that we're able to combine the data that is in our EPIC system, our electronic health record system, to look at test results and comorbid conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, different medicines that people are on, with outcomes based on people's symptoms and based on people's serology and potentially virology results. And the serology, the antibody testing, we do that in a subset of patients selected regionally, demographically. We combine it all together, and that gives us a great database to share with our public health, our public health leaders. We meet with CDC weekly on this data, as well as to answer a number of important research questions. When we first started working on this on March the 24th, and enrolled our first patient on April the 9th. For those of you who have not done something like this before, I will say that was 0 to 60. That was an incredibly busy couple of weeks, and we had dozens of people at Wake Forest in all sorts of offices volunteering time to write protocols, put logistics together. We are now over 19,000 volunteers who are participating in the study at Wake Forest, and that number is continuing to grow. Atrium Health is enrolling. Most recently, they're over 6,000, and they are continuing to enroll. Vidant Health System they're getting angry with me because I've announced every day this week that they have started to enroll, but I've been assured again today that they have started to enroll today. We're very, very pleased that these other partner systems are coming on board and working with us. So how does this work? This is an example from Wake Forest and from Atrium of we have a website. We send out, invitations to people in our My Wake Health or My Patient portal to let them know that they can join, that we would love for them to join, but we have a website that they can come to, that anybody in the public is able to come to. They see a video from our Dean and CEO, Julie Freischlag at Atrium. They see a video from their CEO, Gene Woods, as well as others inviting people to participate and explaining the study. If they want to participate, they're able to sign in English or Spanish online a consent form right there. that triggers us to send their information to our partner. The Oracle Corporation has worked with us right from the beginning, and for free. They have built this system with us. The only thing that they have required of us as partners is that we understand that they've really built it for the Department of Health and Human Services, for the COVID prevention network, for the active trials, for the CDC. So we don't own the data. Oracle doesn't own the data. And Oracle doesn't even own the system. They've given it all to the Department of Health and Human Services for free, and they're letting us use it for free. And so this is a screenshot using me as an example of a little message I get every day on my telephone or computer that says, "Hey, how are you feeling today? Have you had any symptoms? Have you had any contacts with anybody that you knew had COVID? Did you wear a face mask?" If you answer yes to any of these, you get asked a few more questions about, did you seek care? Did you get a test? What type of test did you get? If you answer no, it usually takes me about 5 seconds to fill this out. If I answer yes to any of them, maybe that goes up to about 30 seconds. And we're able to track how many people are putting the information in, what sort of compliance do we have with that? How well is that working? I will say that it's been amazing to me. We've had over 80% of our volunteers doing very, very regular updates. So right now, this slide's a little bit old. We have over 1.7 million status updates into this system now, reporting symptoms and contact. And we are able to track that over time to see how many people by what geographic region are reporting things like cough or fever. But we're not only tracking those symptoms, we are also sending out antibody tests. We've done that in a couple of different ways so far. One is we've partnered with a company called Scanwell Health, a startup company in California that sends volunteers a lateral flow assay, like a home pregnancy test, where they prick their finger, put a drop of blood on it, do the test themselves, and then take a picture using the Scanwell Health app, so that Scanwell Health people interpret it for them. But quite frankly, it's just a bar on, a line on the test. All of our volunteers are able to interpret it themselves. For people, because we were trying it out and some people didn't have the smartphone app readily available, we've also used something called a Neoterix Mitra collection device, where people prick their finger and they pull up a drop of blood, and it preserves the proteins, the antibodies. They send it back to us. So far in testing that out, we've just used that as the collection device and have run the same sort of lateral flow assay. But CDC has asked us to change that collection device and an antibody test for a number of our volunteers. So starting very soon, we will be collecting a dried blood spot. LabCorp will send out a piece of paper, and people prick their finger and put just a couple of drops of blood on a piece of filter paper, send it back to LabCorp, and we'll run some high level testing at LabCorp. So how are we doing so far with this? Well, we enroll we specifically target enrollment by geography and then by demographics. That's age, race, and gender. And then some focus populations. We oversample for antibody testing some high risk, either for exposure, like healthcare workers or first responders, teachers. We want to oversample them to see how they are doing. And we oversample groups that we know have been at high risk for getting infected and for worse outcomes. So oversampling people at more risk. So the African-American community in the region, the Latinx community. And how have we done on that? Well, we've had very good geographic distribution, with obviously the concentration being mainly here in the Triad, right around Winston-Salem, but really spreading out very well in central and western North Carolina. And as our partner sites are coming up, we expect that distribution to spread even more. And we've done okay with volunteer characteristics. And when I say okay, Women tend to be better civic citizens than men, I guess, and have volunteered at a higher rate than men. And healthcare workers have volunteered at an especially high rate. We've had great age distribution among the adults. We are just about to start enrolling pediatric patients, but among adults between 18 up into the high 90s, we've had very good age distribution. We've not done as well with racial and ethnic minorities. So we've clearly had a lot more white volunteers than non-white volunteers, but we have specifically selected within the overall population of the volunteer population who to test with antibodies. So that bias breaks down more when we get to the antibody testing. So it's not perfect. We don't have the full demographic representation that we would like, and we are working on that. We have a lot of outreach into our minority communities, working through our local churches, our local civic organizations, to get out the word and to try to expand that activity. A lot of great partners in that effort. But I will say it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge with the vaccine. Dr. Fauci has said repeatedly, if we can't get minority populations to participate in the vaccine studies, please get them to participate in these sort of epidemiologic studies so that we're able to more clearly look at the burden of disease and the demographics and the need for who needs what intervention. So we are taking that message out that we'd really like good representation in the vaccine studies, but when we can't get it, boy, this is a great alternative. There is no intervention. This is just providing information so that we're all tracking it together. And how have we done enrollment in both of those groups? As I mentioned, as of mid-September, we had seen syndromic surveillance up almost to 20,000. In fact, we think we're over 20,000 with a new glut of enrollment coming through the system now. And in our serology cohort, we were up into the 8,000. We had some logistical difficulties and some discussion with CDC, and we paused on that for what took longer than we meant to. So we're going to very soon, we'll be expanding that serology cohort out again. You can see which counties we have good serology representation from. And what are we finding? This is just a snapshot, sneak peek of information. First off, let me say on the squiggly lines here on the left, that is tracking the symptoms. And what we have seen so far in the non-cold and flu season is a remarkably healthy population. Very few of our patients reported many symptoms. Basically, less than 2% of our 20,000 people, less than 2% of our 1.7 million data entries have reported many symptoms. Now, when they do report symptoms and when we link it to a positive viral test, we can see that certain symptoms stand out as being more meaningful, and that a differential dependent network graph on the right shows that, where you can see that sore throat, cough are important, but it turns out muscle ache and headache are pretty good indicators. And when you combine those together, that becomes even more specific for COVID. How about the serology data?
Dr. Sanders, I want to let you know you have 2 minutes.
Okay. The serology data has gone up and down as new people have entered into the data and entered into the study. We had climbed from basically less than 1% seropositive up to about 9% seropositive on these new tests. But recent tests, we've seen less community spread, and that number is going down. But cumulatively, you can see that we've climbed from really about 1% when we started up to about 9% of the people in our study have ever gotten infected based on the antibody tests. At that same time, very few people have had symptoms. So we are seeing a lot of people getting infected with few or no symptoms. And we expect to see more and more of that data come out as we spread across the state and across the region in the Atlantic coast. So I will stop there, Andrea. Thank you for your patience with me.
Anyone have any questions? Please put it in the chat box.
So Andrea, am I missing the questions?
Yes, no questions have came so far. I was just giving them in the site. Okay. We have a question. How do you volunteer for this study?
I'm sorry, Andrea. How do you volunteer for the study?
Yes.
So you can come to the Wake Forest website, the Wake Forest Baptist Health website, to volunteer. We prefer that you be in our region to do that. If you're in the Charlotte, Mecklenburg area or the Atrium region, we'd rather you go to the Atrium site. If you're in Wake County or Eastern North Carolina or down in Wilmington, we'd rather you go to the site of the center in there, Wake Med, Vidant, New Hanover. Campbell should be enrolling. All of those sites should be coming up here in the next 2 weeks. Vidant started enrolling today. Campbell starts enrolling in a couple of days. Wake Med and New Hanover here in the next 2 weeks. And so you can go to any of our sites, but we'd prefer that you go to the one that you live the closest to.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Seeing no questions, I would like to thank Dr. Sanders for his wonderful presentation. We will stay online for a few more minutes just in case that we have any more questions. Our next session will start at 1:30, and it's going to be the guidance of fee schedules. Thank you. And just stay up here for a little while and see if we have any more questions, Dr. Sanders.
Okay.
So, thank you, Dr. Sanders.
Thanks, and special thanks to Andrea for desperately walking me through getting in. I had registered, but my system wasn't working. So,
okay, we do. I'm sorry, we do have a question. How do you volunteer for the study?
Yeah, anyone can volunteer, and you go to the website for any of our participating organizations, and you just click on the button to get more information and sign the consent form. You can also do it through the Sneeze app. So a number of our institutions, you can go on, to wherever you download applications. You can download an application called Sneeze, SNEEZ, and Sneeze app is partnered with us and all of our organizations, and you can register through the Sneeze app as well.
Okay, thank you. It looks like that was all of the questions. Ms. Monica Short-Owens did say in the chat, this information was great, which it was very informative, and thank you very much. So if that is all, we will conclude this session and the FAMI session. If you have availability to log back on for our next session. And thank you, Dr. Sanders, for your time and your presentation.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.